Hey guys, welcome to Harry the Horse Barbecue. Today, we're gonna show you a detailed look on how we trim briskets.
Harry the Horse Barbecue.
A lot of confusion surrounding briskets. Maybe how much do you cut off? What do you cut off? Where do you cut off? It's not as difficult as it may seem. You just kind of have to know what's going on your particular brisket. Now, every brisket is not treated exactly the same. We'll take you over a couple different anatomy lessons here in a second. So today we've got a Creekstone Farms prime grade Angus beef brisket. Now, a couple of anatomy lessons. If you've seen our how to cook a brisket video prior to this one, you might know that there's two muscles on a brisket. So down here we have what's called the flat muscle. It's obviously flatter and it kind of runs all the way down underneath the brisket here. Over here we have the point muscle, which is a fattier cut, lot more intramuscular marbling there, but it kind of rides over the flat up here. Eventually this muscle just kind of fades out. The two are connected by the seam of fat that runs within the brisket. You can actually see part of the seam fat right in here. The brisket comes from sort of the chest area of the cow, kind of the armpit to chest, kind of in this region in here, okay? And you can imagine why a brisket would be such a tough cut of meat. The cow's walking around, you know? If they're out there, if they're allowed to graze and eat grass and all this kind of stuff, they're moving around quite a bit. That muscle's doing a lot of work, okay? So this is a tough cut of meat, and it's gonna take a while for it to get tender. Now, if this was situated on a cow, okay, if you look at your brisket, okay, actually, when we do this, we're actually treating it upside down. It would be situated on a cow much like this, okay? This would be actually a left side brisket. There's two briskets, a left side and a right side. Kind of down this edge here is where they split the carcass, okay? So that's like kind of where like their chest bone would be. And then this ridge right here kind of tells you that that's the opposite side of the brisket. So this would be situated on a cow much like this, okay? So when we work on it, we're actually working on the underside of the cow. We make that the top of the brisket. Now, a couple other things with the brisket. Right here is part of this seam of fat that is connecting the flat muscle, which runs like this, to about up in here, to the point muscle, which is right in here, okay? You also have another band of fat kind of in here that's connecting the two all the way underneath as well. Those are two major points of trimming on this brisket that we're gonna need to amend during this process. One other thing is when you're picking out a brisket, look for a relatively thick flat. You could see that this flat is pretty thick in here. It thins out over here, so we're gonna have to take care of that. But you also want a flat to be somewhat pliable, okay? This one's kind of moving around a bit, okay? That's a good sign. We want it to be tender at the end of all this. See some good marbling throughout here. We're gonna open this up in a second, but these are just some things you're looking for before you pull this out of the cryovac. We're gonna work on the fat side here when we open this up. We don't wanna damage anything. The meat side, just kind of poke a hole. Okay, let some air in there. Okay, we're gonna slice up the package. Okay, trying to be as tidy as possible, right? We don't want to spill blood anywhere. Now let's take a good close look at this guy. So already got some fanning up of some fat. This ridge we want to protect throughout the cook, okay? Fat seems really hard around here. Let's take a look at the underside. Yeah, real nice marbling throughout here, you can see. Not too worried about some of this fat. This side over here, you could see, looks really gross, right? I don't want to cook this. It's gray, okay? It's kind of flaky already. It's got some weird fat in there. We're not gonna cook that. This is gonna be our first cut. So first cut is gonna be here. And what we're gonna do, just kind of make an imaginary line. I wanna take off to about here, okay? Follow that same line up to about somewhere in here. Okay, we'll trim some other stuff off. Okay. This is where our first cut's gonna come from. Just gonna connect that line. You should always start trimming your briskets further in advance than you may think. Okay. And this is this piece we just cut off. Got some nice marbling in there. The flat is looking a little lean. Hopefully we could save that throughout the cook. Okay. Now we just exposed a really nice edge of the brisket. Okay, and from there I can kind of see how thick the fat is and how thick the flat is. Next cut. Hey, this is a big boy. Use your knife to help you around. This flat is looking real thin over here. Okay, we want to take off some of this gross fat down here. All right. So again, I'm gonna do the same thing, make kind of two parallel lines on opposite sides of the brisket. Now that edge is cut off as well. Flip her over. Next cut, before we get to that nasty seam fat, is I'm gonna start to take down some of this fat from the flat. So next cut, I'm gonna come in here, right in here. Starting to get a little maybe thin in here, but I'm gonna make a cut starting here, because what I can see is I can see the fat, the thickness of the fat on this side. And I wanna take this down way further than that. We're looking for about 1/4 of an inch here. Okay, so as smooth as I can take it. You can always take off more. See, I nicked it already. All right, told you it was getting thin there. Okay. From here, just pull it down. We could take this pocket down just a little bit more. Okay, now this fat looks completely different underneath, right? Starting to kind of crack and flake a little bit. That's good. All right, we're gonna flip it back over. Let's get after some of this hard seam fat in here. This big lump of fat, not gonna render. We gotta take it out, okay? It's almost like if you kind of use your knife and slice around it a bit, you can almost just like pull it out of this pocket. Okay, this one's not that large, but it's still not gonna render. Let's take it out. Now that seam fat looks pretty good, okay? Not nearly as thick. It should render fairly well. Now, this is my next area of concern, is this pocket of fat in here. What we wanna do is cup some of that fat out. Some of it's gonna render, you know, at the end we might not be able to eat a lot of this, but I'm just gonna kind of move along the edge of this point meat down in here and kind of work my way to cut it out. If you cut too much, then that point meat might collapse during the cook. We don't want that. And as you can start to see, it's just starting to flake right out of there. This piece is hanging up here. Let's take that down a bit. I'm a little worried about this ridge now, over in here, okay? Because now there's no fat protecting this. So, gotta keep an eye on this during the cook. Maybe for you guys at home so you could see. What I'm gonna start to do is work down this edge. We're at about maybe a 1/2 inch of fat all the way until we reach about here. I'm gonna kind of match this thickness all the way up. I'm gonna try and turn it this way, get kind of low, and just start to work from where I know is about the thickness of the fat that I want. And I'm gonna work up. And always take more off. Can't put it back on. I'm gonna turn it this way just to continue that cut. But now we can start, matching that all the way around. Yep, that's pretty close to the surface there. We don't want to take too much of that off. This layer, right in here, this is fairly close to the surface. See how I cut a little bit of it back? You're starting to see meat shine through. So we're not going to take too much off of that. Let's work down this front side here. There's a big lump of fat here. I don't want to just take it off. Let's try to shave it down a little bit. Still quite a bit over in here. I'm just going to start shaving it down. Okay, because I still have like a little bit of gray meat in here. Just trying to take a little bit of this off. Find that fat seam in there. Take a little bit more of that fat off. Now this is a bit fatty still on this end. I don't want to take too much off because we need it to protect the point during the cook. Continue to trim some of this down. Pretty fatty up towards the top here. We don't want all of this fat. I'm gonna leave a little extra fat on there just because the point seems a bit narrow. Looking pretty good all around. You probably want to take most of the stuff that was that came in the packaging. You probably want to take most of that off. But in this case, I can't. If I take any more off through here, there's not going to be enough fat on top of the lean brisket. So I'm making the judgment call to just keep that there. Seam fat looks all right. Fat up here looks good. It still may be a little fatty in this area. Now as this fat starts to warm up, it starts to get more difficult to cut. Okay, I think I'm gonna let it go like this in terms of trimming the fat off the brisket on the top side here, or at least our presentation side. We just kind of spot check it, make sure it's the way we want it. All right, double checking again. Point looks good under here, a lot of marbling throughout. Maybe a little fatty on the end of the point, but that's okay. We're gonna put that end towards the fire. This stuff in here I'm not gonna take off. It's gonna render, okay? There's no real silver skin in here, maybe a little bit, but I'm not gonna worry about taking that off, okay? This seam fat looks nice, okay? It doesn't feel like that hard fat that's not gonna render. All right guys, now the last thing that we wanna do is we want to trim up this part of the flat here because you can see it just fades out. Okay, so I'm gonna flip this back over. And since I kind of skinned it here, I'm kind of gonna just turn into sort of like a rounded edge. Okay, the flat is thick here. We're gonna have to lose quite a bit of this, which I'm not happy about, but it is what it is. So since I skinned it there, kind of working my knife, making sure it looks okay as I cut through. Okay. It's kind of good that I got that out. It's kind of a piece of hard fat in there. Now you can see what we've got left is relatively thick. Hopefully it survives the cook, okay? Real thick flat on this end though. You can see how thick that is running through, okay? Hopefully enough fat on there to protect that, okay? All right, and now this brisket just needs to get seasoned and is ready to get thrown on. So thank you guys for tuning in to Harry the Horse Barbecue. It's raining out, I gotta get this brisket on, but I hope that this helped you guys understand maybe how to trim your briskets. Remember, every brisket is different, so not every single cut I make, you might make, right? I probably would make different cuts on a different brisket, okay? But this particular brisket, I think this was the best way to get me to the best end product I could get out of this brisket. You gotta sacrifice in order for your product to come out really, really well. Remember to keep on brisketing, and we'll check you guys back here in the next one. Salt and pepper is going on this guy. I got like a 12, 14 hour cook to get to. Catch you guys in the next one. I'm out.